Have you ever seen a man walk into a room and everyone laughed only to regret it seconds later? This is the story of one man they thought was powerless, a janitor with a mop, a man dismissed as invisible. But what no one knew was that he carried enough power to bring the entire company crashing down in a single day. The morning sun spilled across the steel and glass towers of Riverside Tech, one of the largest firms in Los Angeles. Executives in pressed suits strode confidently through the lobby, never glancing twice at the gray-clad figure who pushed a cleaning cart across the marble floor. His name, as far as anyone cared, was Elias Brown. To them, he was just another janitor. At 59, Elias looked the part. His uniform was slightly faded, his shoes worn, his salt and pepper hair tucked neatly beneath a cap. His hands were calloused, weathered by years of labor. He bowed his head politely when executives brushed past him, some muttering jokes under their breath, others tossing coffee cups into his nearly empty trash bin. No one recognized the truth. No one realized that Elias was not a janitor at all. The man who wiped their floors was the very same man who had built this empire 30 years ago. He was the silent majority shareholder of Riverside Tech, the visionary who had stepped away a decade earlier, hoping the company could sustain itself on the values he had carved into its foundation: fairness, innovation, inclusion. But whispers had reached him. Dark whispers. Reports of arrogance, corruption, and cruelty flourishing at the very top. So Elias Brown had returned, not as founder or investor, but as the lowest among them. He wanted to see the truth with his own eyes. As he moved through the lobby that morning, a voice cut through the air like a whip. "Hey, janitor, missed a spot." The words came from Daniel Cross, the chief financial officer. Daniel was young compared to Elias, but his arrogance filled the halls like poison. Several executives chuckled at the insult, pretending not to, looked directly at Elias as he bent down, cloth in hand, to wipe an already spotless corner of the floor. "Careful," Daniel added with a sneer. "Wouldn't want the boss to trip." Elias gave no reply. His expression was calm, his posture unbent, though the sting of humiliation pressed heavily against his chest. He had endured this kind of mockery before, decades ago, when investors doubted a black man could ever succeed in the tech industry. Now, after years of progress, here it was again, this same poison thriving in the walls of the company he had created. By midday, Elias wheeled his cart into the executive dining hall. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above while Daniel held court at the long polished table. His voice carried confidently, mocking the very ideals upon which Riverside had been built. "Once we finalize the Riverstone acquisition," Daniel declared to approving nods, "the first order of business is cutting out all those ridiculous diversity programs. Dead weight, a total waste of money." Several executives laughed, some clapped softly in agreement. Elias froze. Every word sliced against his memory of why this company had once thrived. It had thrived because every voice mattered, because differences had fueled creativity. Now those principles were being gutted in plain sight. Across the room, Mariana Flores, head of human resources, lifted her eyes from her tablet and studied Elias. Her expression was unreadable, but her gaze lingered long enough to suggest suspicion. Perhaps she noticed the intelligence behind his eyes. Perhaps she wondered why a janitor looked at Daniel with such restrained fire. Later, in the stairwell where no one could hear, Elias pulled out his phone. His voice dropped into the tone of command he had hidden all morning. "It's worse than we thought. Prepare the documents." By afternoon, the executives gathered in the boardroom for the most important meeting of the quarter. The Riverstone deal was set to shape the future of the company. Charts and projections filled the screen as Daniel outlined a plan of streamlining departments and eliminating unnecessary programs. It was then that Elias entered. His cart squeaked faintly against the glossy floor as he emptied bins around the long mahogany table. Laughter broke out almost immediately. "What's the janitor doing here during a billion-dollar discussion?" Daniel smirked, dropping a crumpled paper deliberately onto the floor. Might as well let him give us advice on mergers. The room erupted in laughter. Even Caroline Hale, the CEO, checked her watch with impatience. "Please finish quickly," she said coldly. "We're busy." Elias bent to retrieve the paper. His hand brushed Daniel's chair, and in a flash, the CFO spun around. Jesus, can't you even do your job right? This is why people like you sweep floors instead of making decisions. The room went silent. Every eye locked on the janitor who stood upright now, his dignity unbroken though a flush crept across his face. I apologize, sir, Elias said softly. He turned back to his cart. But inside, the fire was building. The same fire that had once built an empire. And what happened next, no one in that room was ready for. Elias stood frozen at the door for a moment, his cart still beside him. The executives were already shifting back to their reports, chuckling under their breath, brushing off the insult as if it were just another harmless joke. But Daniel wasn't finished. He leaned back in his chair, his voice cutting across the boardroom with calculated cruelty. Come on, janitor. Since we're all about inclusivity these days, why don't you give us your thoughts on our $200 million deal? A ripple of laughter spread across the table. Some executives laughed nervously, others more openly. A few avoided eye contact altogether, choosing the safety of silence. That silence, Elias knew, was the most dangerous response of all. Daniel waved him forward, mock courtesy dripping from his tone. Right here, best seat in the house, don't be shy. Tell us if the colors on the chart are easy enough for you to understand. Elias placed his cart gently against the wall. He walked forward slowly, his posture straight, every step deliberate. The eyes of employees passing outside the glass walls turned toward the strange sight of a janitor standing at the head of an executive meeting. Daniel grinned, resting a hand on Elias's shoulder as if he were a prop in his show. Don't mind us. This is probably the highlight of his week, getting to see how real business works. The humiliation was sharp, methodical. Elias could feel it pressing against him like a weight. Yet his eyes never wavered from the projections glowing across the screen. He studied the graphs, the lines, the numbers, and he saw them clearly. 3 fatal mistakes. Errors so large that they could bury the entire deal before it even began. He stood silently for a moment longer, letting the room settle, letting their arrogance tighten like a noose. Then, in a voice that carried the calmness of truth, he spoke. Your projections failed to account for Riverstone's debt restructuring last quarter. The words struck the air like a hammer. The laughter stopped. Papers rustled as heads turned. For the first time that day, Daniel's smile faltered. Impressive guess, he said loudly, trying to recover. Maybe you've been reading the business section during your coffee breaks. His laugh rang false, but he pressed on. Now let's get back to actual business. Elias gave no argument. He only turned and began pushing his cart toward the door again. As he passed by Mariana Flores, the HR director, he slipped a small card into her folder. Her eyes widened when she saw it. The name written there was one every person in that room should have known. Elias Brown, majority shareholder, founder. Behind the closet door, Elias leaned against the shelves, his breath steady but heavy with years of memory. He remembered the times investors told him to use the service elevator, even when he was the one paying the rent. He remembered being mistaken for staff at his own presentations. He remembered every insult that had taught him to fight harder, work longer, prove himself twice over. He had believed the world had changed. He had believed the company could carry forward without his hand guiding it. But what he had seen today proved otherwise. He raised his phone again, his voice firm now, stripped of any disguise. It's time. Prepare for emergency board action. I want every discrimination report, every audit, every piece of evidence on my desk tomorrow. As he spoke, a quiet knock echoed against the closet door. Elias pocketed his phone, mask sliding back into place. When the door opened, Mariana stepped inside. She held up his card, her eyes sharp with knowing. I knew you weren't ordinary, she said. The way you spotted those numbers. No janitor notices mistakes like that. She set down her tablet, screen glowing with months of evidence, emails, complaints, patterns of discrimination buried by leadership. I've been documenting everything. Promotions denied, Voices silenced. People driven out. They thought no one would listen. Elias looked at her steadily, the decision already hardening within him. They were wrong. What I saw today ends now. And for the first time, Mariana smiled, not in arrogance, not in triumph, but in hope. Daniel shut his office door and pulled up the maintenance schedule. He scrolled fast, then slower, then stopped. There was no janitor assigned to the executive floor that day. His face tightened. He picked up the phone and kept his voice level. Security. I need a quiet sweep. Older black male in a maintenance uniform. Keep it off the cameras that matter. Find him without a scene. He ended the call and stared at the glass wall of his office. The floor below hummed with the usual rhythm of typing and muted conversations. Yet something in that rhythm felt off. A note of watchfulness, a faint tremor of doubt running under the carpet. Down in analytics, Jay Carter stood beside his desk with a folder held close to his chest. He was new to the team, sharp and steady, a black analyst whose promotion had been delayed twice for reasons that never quite made sense. Today he had found something he could not ignore. These synergy estimates look aggressive, Jay said carefully. Riverstone's market share is stable, but the integration costs are undercounted. The model misses their debt schedule. If we overpay, we absorb liabilities we cannot offset within the first 2 quarters. Daniel loomed over him, smile gone. Are you questioning my analysis, Jay? I am pointing out risks. Jay's voice did not shake. The assumptions collapse if the culture fit fails. Their retention incentives are tied to programs you plan to cut. That triggers attrition. We lose the team we think we are buying. Daniel snatched the folder. Maybe you should learn basic financials before you speak, or you can mop the floor, with our guest from earlier. He tossed the folder back onto the desk. Pages fanned out like cards. At the doorway, Caroline Hale had arrived in time to hear enough. She stepped forward, then stopped herself. Let's stay professional, she said in a measured tone. Due diligence includes dissenting views. Daniel's look said more than his words. Thank you for your input, Jay. Now let me handle the deal. Caroline stood there a moment longer, the weight of a choice rising in her throat, and then she turned away. In a small conference room with the blinds half drawn, Mariana Flores met with 5 employees from different teams. She took notes as each spoke, letting silence do the hard work between sentences. He said my accent was not client-facing. My promotion kept moving to next quarter. When I filed a complaint, my review dropped without warning. They joked about hair, about names, about background. Some of us left. Some of us stayed quiet. Mariana listened. She documented. She asked for dates and names. She asked how they wanted their accounts used. She promised to protect them. When they left, she stayed seated for a long minute, fingers resting on the screen. She had evidence. Now she had witnesses who trusted her. She knew that trust could not be broken. In the break room, Elias refilled the paper towel dispenser beside a mid-level manager he had seen around the building. The man glanced left and right, then spoke in a low voice. You hear the talk about Riverstone, he said. We are not ready. Their identity is built on fairness. Our numbers look good on slides, but the day-to-day is off. If someone dug into culture on both sides, the contrast would be hard to ignore. Then someone should look, Elias said. The man nodded as if he had been waiting for that answer. If you compare their retention around mentorship with ours, you see it. People stay where they are respected. Across town, Caroline answered a call that made her stomach drop. Mr. Vale, I hear your concern, she said into the phone. Riverside Tech remains committed to the values your company holds. Any rumors will be addressed. The timeline stays in our mutual interest. She paused and listened. Anonymous concerns. I understand. Thank you for bringing them to me. She ended the call and dialed Daniel at once. We have a problem. Someone is feeding Riverstone doubts about our culture. Daniel was already moving. Minutes later, he stood before a handful of senior leaders in a small room with a screen on the wall. Caroline was not invited. We have a security threat, Daniel said. He tapped the screen. A still image appeared. A maintenance uniform, a cap low over steady eyes. The photo came with a label from the security feed, unscheduled personnel, identity unknown. That janitor was not assigned to our floor, Daniel said. He hovered over our projections and asked about debt. He is not a janitor. He is gathering intelligence, possibly for a competitor. The chief technology officer frowned. That is serious. Are you certain? Serious enough, Daniel said. We will find him. Until then, say nothing about the deal outside this room. The image on the screen lingered. Some saw a stranger. Some saw a risk. No one saw the founder who had built the building they worked in, at a quiet restaurant tucked between old bungalows and new offices. Aaron Vale, the CEO of Riverstone Systems, studied the man across the table. The janitor's uniform was gone. In its place, a charcoal suit with a simple tie. Elias looked like what he had always been. When my assistant said, "Elias Brown wanted to meet," I had doubts, Aaron said. Now I understand the urgency. I stepped back years ago to let others lead, Elias said. I hoped the values would endure without my shadow. They did not. And the anonymous warning to us. Aaron leaned forward. That was you. Needed time to confirm what I heard, Elias said. I needed the truth without stagecraft. Why not remove your CFO? Aaron asked. Why walk in with a cart? Because culture hides in daylight, Elias said. People speak freely in front of the person they think has no power. I needed to see who they were when they thought no one important was watching. Aaron sat back with a long breath. You realize this could stop the acquisition. I realize it could save it, Elias said. Not at the cost of your identity. Not under a plan that guts the very thing that made your team strong. If we proceed, it is with your commitments preserved and expanded, or we do not proceed at all. Aaron considered the weight of those words. You are still the majority shareholder. I am, Elias said. Due process still matters. Evidence matters. That is why I came here as myself. Aaron nodded, once. Send me what you have. If this is what you say it is, Riverstone pauses. Not forever. Long enough to ensure we are not walking into a storm. Back at Riverside Tech, whispers moved like current through the halls. Someone had stirred the air. Security teams walked with purpose while pretending nothing was wrong. In finance, Daniel stood at his window with the city below him. He watched. The traffic merge and split. He believed he could do the same with people. He picked up his phone again. Find the man, he said. I want him before the next board session. In a smaller office on the executive floor, Caroline closed the door and sent a message to a number she had not saved under a name. She had received the number minutes earlier in an envelope left on her chair with no return mark. Emergency board session tomorrow. Your decision will define you. The sender line showed 2 words. Elias Brown. She stared at the letters and realized there were only 2 paths left. That night, in a borrowed workspace near the river, Nina Park, the attorney who had represented Elias for 2 decades, spread out documents on a long table. Policy violations, buried complaints, comparative pay analysis, promotion data mapped against race and gender. She worked with quiet focus while Elias reviewed statements from employees who were ready to speak. How far will they go to keep this buried? Nina asked. As far as fear drives them, Elias said. We move with facts. We move with care. We move now. Mariana's phone buzzed with a single line from an unknown source who had watched the boardroom scene from the hallway. They laughed today. Tomorrow they answer. She stood by her window and let the city lights steady her breathing. She was not alone anymore. The choice to act had been made. The proof would stand or fall in daylight. In the early morning hours, Daniel called 3 board allies. He spoke of hostile takeovers and disloyalty. He spoke of security threats and trade secrets. He spoke in tight circles designed to keep power close. When he ended the last call, his hands were steady, but his eyes had a new edge. He told himself he still controlled the board. He told himself the founder had no majority. He told himself many things. He opened the ownership registry. He searched again. He traced holdings through partnerships and trusts. He followed lines he had ignored before. His throat dried as the connections resolved into one name that sat behind them all. Elias Brown. He closed the window and sat still. For the first time, the cold reached him. By dawn, the building woke to a different kind of day. Assistants compared calendars no one had seen before. Security posted near the boardroom without visible tension. People who had felt invisible found reasons to stand a little straighter. In analytics, Jay opened an email he never expected to. See, bring your notes on Riverstone to the board floor at 10. Your analysis matters. He read the line again, a simple sentence that felt like a door opening. Caroline set her phone down after drafting a statement she might need to give. She looked at the words and knew they were not enough. She would have to speak without a script. She would have to decide in public. Elias walked through the lobby with his suit jacket over his arm. He paused near the maintenance desk and signed the log as he had done every morning that week. The guard glanced up, then did a double take, uncertain where he had seen the same steady eyes. Daniel arrived minutes later with a look that tried to hide urgency. He kept moving, fast but controlled, toward the room where his future would be decided. The doors of the boardroom opened. People took their seats. Documents slid across polished wood. The air held a quiet so heavy it felt like sound, and when Elias stepped inside, the room finally understood who they had laughed at. The boardroom settled into a heavy quiet as Elias walked to the head of the table. Daniel stood at once and pointed toward the door. He is not authorized to be here. Security, remove him now. Elias set a leather folder on the table. His voice was steady and clear. That will not be necessary. My name is Elias Brown, founder of Riverside Tech, majority shareholder. A few chairs scraped the floor. Heads turned toward the board secretary. She opened a binder with shaking hands. She read the certificates Elias slid across the table. Holding companies, trusts, voting agreements. The paper trail formed one line back to his name. She gave a small nod. It checks out. Daniel tried to laugh. The sound died in his throat. You expect us to accept this stunt as business. You left years ago. You do not get to walk in and claim the head seat. I stepped back so the culture could stand on its own, Elias said. I returned because it did not. Nina Park entered with a slim case. She placed a short stack of policies beside the projector control. Her tone was precise. Company policy states that common areas are subject to security monitoring. All employees acknowledge this each year. These recordings were captured in monitored zones. Conference rooms, hallways, cafeterias. Elias pressed a key. The screen lit up with the boardroom from the day before. Daniel dropped a paper to the floor and mocked the man who bent to pick it up. Laughter filled the speakers. The room watching now did not laugh. The next clip showed Daniel in the dining hall. His voice was clear. First we cut the programs that do nothing but drain profit. Then we hire for fit. After that, this place moves. Another clip followed. A hallway exchange. A joke about names. A joke about hair. A joke about background. The kind of joke that marks and reminds. The kind of joke that scars. Elias paused the video. He did not raise his voice. This is not a single bad moment. This is how power learned to speak when it thought no one important was listening. The door opened. Mariana stepped in with a tablet and sealed folders. She set one in front of each board member. Inside were dates, emails, reviews, and statements. Patterns measured beside outcomes. Promotion lag, pay gaps, exit interview trends that pointed in one direction. These are accounts from current staff and former staff, Mariana said. They describe harassment and retaliation. They show a system that punished dissent and rewarded silence. Screens flickered to recorded statements. A marketing lead described a review that fell after a complaint. A developer described ideas ignored until repeated by someone else. A manager described being told that clients preferred a different kind of voice. Their words were calm. Their calm carried more weight than anger. Caroline stood. The room waited. She looked at the folders. She looked at the screen. She looked at Elias. I failed to act. I saw enough to know better. I chose comfort instead of courage. I accept responsibility for that. She took a breath. I will cooperate with whatever this board decides. I will support a full audit. I will accept the result. Elias nodded. Once. Thank you for telling the truth. He turned to Daniel. Effective immediately, Daniel Cross is suspended pending termination for cause, harassment, retaliation, misrepresentation to the board, conduct that damaged shareholder interests. Daniel rose hard enough to rattle his chair. You cannot remove me in a day. I know things you do not want public, systems, accounting gaps, vulnerabilities that will punish this company if they come out. Nina met his stare. Threatening to disclose protected information is a violation of your contracts. It exposes you to civil and criminal risk. Choose with care. Security entered and stood near the wall. No one touched Daniel. He stayed frozen for a long second as the truth closed around him. Then he reached for his laptop and phone. You are throwing away value to chase headlines, he said. You will regret this. Value built on fear is a debt, Elias said. We stopped carrying it today. Security stepped forward. Daniel looked from face to face. He did not find a lifeline. He walked to the door with his jaw tight and his eyes hot. He paused once on the threshold. This is not over. The door closed behind him. Silence reclaimed the room. People looked at the folders in front of them and then up at Elias. He did not let the pause grow stale. Today we begin repairs. An independent audit starts now. Promotions and pay will be reviewed. Anonymous reporting will be moved to an external firm. Every leader will be evaluated against outcomes that include culture and retention. This is not a press plan. This is a business plan. He turned to Caroline. You remain in your role for now. Your honesty today matters. Your actions next matter more. I understand, she said. Elias faced the board. The Riverstone deal continues only with their values protected. We will not buy a company to break what makes it strong. I will meet Aaron Vale this afternoon to set new terms. A few members shifted. One cleared his throat. Markets may punish us in the short term. They will, Elias said. They will also punish the lawsuits we will avoid and the talent we will keep if we fix this. We will show the link between culture and performance with data, not slogans. Then the market will follow. He raised a last document. We will also form a council that includes staff from outside this room, engineers, support, operations. Equal votes on cultural policy. Power without accountability is how we got here. That ends. He closed the folder and the meeting with it. Outside, word moved faster than doors could close. People learned that leadership had changed and that evidence had been seen. Some felt relief as if a held breath finally left their bodies. Some felt fear as if the ground had shifted under their feet. Most felt both. Daniel stepped into the daylight and put on his sunglasses. He did not look back. He pulled his phone from his pocket and began to call the few allies he believed he still had. His voice was calm again. He knew which stories to tell. He knew which nerves to press. Inside, Elias walked the executive floor with Mariana and Nina. They drafted notices. They scheduled interviews. They set timelines that were measured in days, not months. Jay received a message asking him to present his analysis to a new committee. He read it twice. He closed his eyes and let out a long breath he had been holding since he started at Riverside. In a quiet office, Caroline stared at her reflection in the dark screen of her monitor. She had been given a chance to repair what she had allowed to break. She knew chances like that did not come often. She pressed a number and asked her assistant to cancel the rest of her day. Then she picked up the phone and called 3 people she had failed to protect. She asked to meet. She promised to listen first. By mid-afternoon, the new plan for the Riverstone talks was on paper. Terms linked leadership pay to inclusion results. Programs would be preserved and expanded. Teams would be protected through transition. Risk would be measured beyond spreadsheets. At sunset, the city lights rose one by one. From the street, Riverside Tech looked the same as it had in the morning. Inside, something fundamental had shifted. Trust would take time. Justice would take work. Both, had finally been named as goals. Night came. The building emptied. A single floor still glowed. Elias stood by the window and watched the freeway turn into long chains of white and red. He thought about the first loan he had signed with a rate no one else would have accepted. He thought about the first prototype, built on a table in a rented shop. He thought about the first hire. He thought about the harm that had grown in the cracks of success. He let those thoughts pass through him and settle. He picked up his phone and called Aaron Vale. "We proceed. If we protect what matters," he said. "Are you ready to build that with me?" "I am," Aaron said. "Send me the terms. We meet tomorrow." Elias ended the call and turned off the light. Down the hall, a cleaning cart rolled past the open door. A young man in a fresh uniform nodded when he saw him. Elias stepped out to help hold the bag while the bin was emptied. The young man looked surprised. "Thank you, sir." "Thank you," Elias said. "What is your name?" "Luis." "Luis, bring your resume to HR tomorrow. We are building new teams. We need people who take pride in their work." Luis smiled and nodded, unsure if it was a joke or a promise. Elias meant every word. Morning would bring headlines and phone calls and noise. Morning would also bring the work, and somewhere across town Daniel would start his next move. The days that followed moved like storms colliding. The headlines struck first. Business media ran stories of a founder's return, speculating whether Riverside Tech could survive such sudden upheaval. Blogs lit up with words like undercover, toxic culture, and reckoning. Some investors panicked and shares dipped. Others whispered that long-term stability was worth the price of temporary shock. Inside the building, the air carried both fear and relief. Employees who had swallowed humiliation now spoke cautiously in corners, wondering if real change was possible. Those who had thrived under Daniel's shadow clung to silence, unsure which way the current would flow. Daniel himself worked the phones from his mansion in the hills. "They've turned Riverside into a social experiment," he told an old ally. "We built profits while they preach values. The market will punish them, and when it does, I'll be ready." Yet with each call, the circle of support grew smaller. Evidence against him had seeped into the press, and no one wanted to drown with him. Meanwhile, Elias moved with quiet certainty. He created teams to audit pay and promotion records. He gave Mariana full authority to oversee cultural reform, even elevating her role beyond what had ever existed before. For the first time, human resources was not a shield for leadership, but a sword for employees. In analytics, Jay Carter sat before the board with his notes spread carefully across the table. Elias invited him to explain the flaws in Riverstone's valuation. Jay's voice was steady as he laid out risks Daniel had buried. When he finished, Elias leaned forward. "Your analysis was right," he said. "It deserves a seat at the table. Starting today, you're joining the strategy team." Jay lowered his eyes for a moment, the weight of years of dismissal pressing against the sudden recognition. Then he nodded firmly. Elsewhere, Zoe Bennett, a marketing manager who had been offered a hurried promotion in Daniel's last desperate maneuver, walked into Mariana's office with the unsigned document. "I don't want advancement as hush money," she said. "I want it on merit. If I've earned it, prove it with data. If I haven't, don't give it to me." Mariana smiled, a small spark of hope flaring in her chest. "You just became part of the solution," she told her. As the reforms unfolded, resistance surfaced. 2 executives resigned rather than face review. Others whispered of leaving. Elias accepted their decisions without hesitation but made it clear. Departure did not shield anyone from investigation. Transparency meant past actions would face light, whether their owners remained or not. In the midst of this storm, Riverstone hesitated. Their CEO, Aaron Vale, called another meeting with Elias. "We believe in your new direction," he said, "but we cannot tie ourselves to a company that slips back into the same rot once the headlines fade." Elias understood. He had no intention of letting reform die in silence. Together, they reshaped the acquisition. Diversity programs were not only preserved, but expanded, and executive bonuses were tied directly to cultural benchmarks. This was not symbolic, it was enforceable. Back at Riverside, Caroline Hale began her own quiet penance. She met with employees who had once come to her for help. She listened without interruption, noting their words in her own hand. She admitted what she had ignored. Her redemption was fragile, but it was real. Yet even as the building shifted toward renewal, shadows stretched outside its walls. Daniel sat at a long, polished bar across town, sipping a drink while speaking in low tones to a man whose face was turned away from the light. "They think they've buried me," Daniel said. "They've only planted me deeper. I know their weaknesses. I know the systems Elias never touched. If your firm wants to move against them, I can give you the keys." The man across from him raised his glass slowly. "Then tell me everything." What Daniel did not know was that eyes already followed him. Every call, every meeting, every whispered scheme was being tracked. Elias had no illusions about the danger Daniel posed. He had built too much not to prepare for the backlash. The game was not over. It was only moving to its next stage. The morning of the emergency hearing arrived with a sense of inevitability. Outside the headquarters, camera crews gathered, their lenses fixed on the glass doors as board members filed inside. Reporters whispered about what might unfold, though none of them knew how far the rot had spread. Inside, the boardroom was fuller than usual. Investors joined by video feed. Legal observers sat along the back wall. A hush fell as Elias entered, composed and unhurried, his presence commanding without a single raised word. Daniel sat opposite, him flanked by the last two allies who still dared to appear at his side. His jaw was set, his eyes cold. He had prepared speeches about profits, about loyalty, about the danger of social experiments. But as Elias laid out document after document, video after video, witness after witness, those speeches shriveled before they could be spoken. Mariana presented the culture audits with graphs that revealed patterns of discrimination impossible to deny. Nina read clauses of contracts Daniel had broken through threats and retaliation. Jay Carter stood, younger than anyone else in the room, and explained in plain language how Daniel's false numbers would have sunk the Riverstone deal in under a year. The board watched as truth piled higher than excuses. Daniel struck back with venom. "This is theater. Stockholders care about returns, not feelings. You punish me for being effective." Elias answered calmly. "Your numbers were not effective. They were lies wrapped in arrogance. You gambled with the company's soul for a quick quarter, and you lost." When the vote came, it was swift. Daniel Cross was terminated for cause, barred from returning, his shares frozen pending legal review. He rose slowly, scanning the faces that had once laughed with him. Not one met his eyes. Security approached, but he pushed back his chair himself. At the door he paused, his voice sharp with rage. "You think you've won, but you've chained this company to ideals the market doesn't value. Investors will flee, competitors will crush you, and when they do, you'll wish you'd kept me." Elias did not flinch. The market values strength, and nothing is stronger than a company that refuses to rot from within. Daniel left the room, his footsteps echoing like the last notes of a broken anthem. The days that followed carried both turbulence and clarity. Riverside's stock dipped, then leveled, then began to rise again as investors saw what came with reform, lawsuits avoided, talent returning, innovation rising. Riverstone finalized the acquisition under the new terms, their values intact and reinforced. Inside the company, change moved like a tide. Anonymous reporting systems opened. Audits rolled out. Promotions began aligning with merit, not favoritism. Employees who had considered leaving stayed, and some who had left returned, bringing skills and stories with them. One evening, Elias walked the executive floor alone. A janitor was emptying bins, a young man with sharp eyes and careful movements. Elias stepped forward to help tie a bag, and when the young man thanked him, he asked a simple question. "What's your degree in?" "Computer science," the janitor said, surprised. Applied twice for engineering roles. Didn't make it past screening. There are openings now, Elias said, handing him a card. Bring your resume tomorrow. Let's see if your talent fits where it belongs. The young man stared at the card, half disbelieving, but Elias meant every word. Months later, Riverside Tech stood transformed. Innovation climbed. Lawsuits vanished. Shareholders spoke not just of profits but of culture as a metric of value. What had begun as humiliation ended as revelation, that true power is not measured by who you can break down, but by who you lift up. Elias never forgot the lesson he had taught in silence and revealed in thunder, that dignity cannot be mocked into dust, and justice, once awakened, spreads like fire through the halls of power. And somewhere across the ocean, Daniel nursed his bitterness, offering secrets to competitors who only half listened. His voice, once loud, now carried no weight. His legacy was not of triumph, but of warning. The story of Riverside was no longer his. It belonged to those who chose courage over comfort, truth over silence, and strength through inclusion over weakness through fear. And that story was only beginning.